Hello, I'm Gary Quinn, and welcome to another episode of Ready, Set, Live. My guest today is Ross King, MBE, a four-time News Emmy and multi-award winning performer, and is one of Britain's most vibrant and versatile talents. In 2018, Ross was honored with an MBE from Her Majesty the Queen for his services to broadcasting, the arts, and charity. Ross is also a familiar face in the UK and in Europe, appearing daily on ITV's top-rated morning shows, Good Morning Britain and Lorraine, as their US correspondent. He has covered major events like the Oscars, Tonys, Emmys, Golden Globes, and Grammys, as well as significant major news stories. Don't go away. I'll be back with Ross King. Welcome, Ross. It's so
Thank
great
you.
to have you.
I feel after that introduction we should say good night. That's all we've got time for, but thank you.
It was so great to finally see you and to meet you again after all these years.
Yeah, you too.
You know, your work is quite extraordinary. I think your body of work speaks for itself. And I know growing up in Scotland, you had three major, let's say, epiphanies at age 5, at age 15, and age 17.
Wow, there's a man who's done his homework. That's most impressive.
You were 5 years old. How did you tell your mom I'm going to be an entertainer, or what did you say?
No, it's an interesting background because my mum and dad both were very musical. Mum played the piano, so I would come home, from school, or even as a kid growing up, the piano was always being played. Dad was very musical. He was in the Salvation Army, and he conducted the band and the choir and played the euphonium and a whole host of instruments. So I was surrounded by music, and also I didn't really think so much at the time. I was surrounded by people really performing, because you think of the Salvation Army, but then my dad would host events and would crack jokes. And then I had uncles who were also early DJs in dance hall days as well. So Uncle Bill and Uncle Norman and Uncle Walter. So I never thought we were in show business, but we kind of were. We were showbiz adjacent. How about that?
Okay.
So I was surrounded by that. So it was a sort of fairly natural step, I think.
And basically, I think being exposed at such a young age, all of a sudden you get the wanting. You didn't come over to the U.S. then. You started working. What age did you come to the U.S.?
Oh my goodness me! I came here in 2000, so 24 years ago, which basically means I'm a dinosaur. I think.
But you were already working in London.
Yeah, I was so lucky, Gary, that I got into the basic journey for me was, again, as you were saying, when I was a kid at school and got into performing and acting and singing. And then when I was 16, I joined the local radio station, which was a huge station called Radio Clyde that went all over the west and central Scotland. And I was so lucky that I came in. It was kind of like wham time. Mm-hmm. And, all the other DJs were getting older and heavier. And in came this, kid that smiled a lot, had kind of long blondish hair, and it was like, wake me up before you go. And they were like, put him on the road shows and things like that. So I was so lucky.
Yeah, I could hear your voice like you'd be a great DJ. You have that great quality.
Oh, thank you.
So basically, what was there an inspiration that drove you, or what was your, I think everybody has certain epiphanies that happen that they say, this is the role I want to do in life? Or was there somebody you looked up to as a mentor that you said, I want to be just like him? Or
yeah, there were quite a few moments in my life, Gary, like that. I think the first one was going back to when you were saying when I was 5 and I was doing a school play, and it was Dick Whittington, and I remember going on this stage and tripping and falling, and as I fell, I did like a little sort of forward roll and got back up. And I got laughs and applause. And I think there was that pathetic thing as a child going, wow, there's applause, there's laughter. This could be for me. But then as I got older, and I was playing football a lot, soccer, and that looked like what I was going to do. I was going to be good enough to be an okay professional footballer, but not a very good one. But my dad and mum were very encouraging. And when I said, look, I don't think I want to do the football side, I want to go into show business, they said, look, we just don't don't know Coco the Clown, we can't help but we'll support you, which is what they did. They said, whatever you want to do. And in the weird and wonderful way that you know that life works, when I was at school, my math teacher, a guy called Roddy Hood, had said to me, would you like to do some of the school discos? And I was like, okay, sounds fun to me. Then he said, Mrs. Lawson, another math teacher, her son Alan is a sound engineer at the BBC, but he got into it all through hospital radio. And so in Glasgow, they had the hospital radio station, which broadcast to all these hospitals. And you went in there and you learned a bit of your trade. So that's what I did. I went in when I was 15, still at school. And then again, local radio, joined at 16 and did everything. I was the studio factotum. I just learned how to rig soccer grounds, put the cables over. You know, as I look around your beautiful studio today, I go, oh, there's a male XLR. I could flip that. So, you know, you never lose that side of things. And it was such a brilliant grounding. But also the advice that I got from my mum. And I remember thinking, I was much older when I realized what she meant. She would always say, and it's the thing I've heard it said on your show as well, just do your best. That's all you can do. And I think I was probably about 21 before I realized, yeah, if you do your best, that's all you can do. You know, whether it be auditioning for something or performing. If you've done your research, if you've done the work, even from a footballing point of view, was I training? Was I eating properly? Was I thinking, you know, about it all? So if you do your best, you cannot do any better. And if that doesn't match up to what someone wants, you can't do it.
And you know what's so interesting? I think when anybody chooses a profession, especially the entertainment world, you know, people always say it's so hard or this or that. But I think the intention of you being in the work, it's refreshing to see when a artist or performer is so into the work that their work jumps off the page. And I believe everybody has that magic, and we all inspire to be this light or this essence of joy. And a lot of people don't seem to, you know, they get discouraged quickly, and you must never give up, because that's the key for any work that one does. What was your, let's say, being in the UK before you came to America, who was the person that you met or your first interview there that you said, wow, that was quite an amazing or smashing interview?
Yeah, a smashing interview. Oh yeah, I mean, well, two things I would say. The interview that I remember going, oh my goodness me, was a man who used to say, my name is Bond, James Bond, Roger Moore. Ooh. And so it was Roger, and he was incredible. And he was so lovely with me, and I was such a young guy at the time, and I was doing the interview for radio, and at the end of it, I always remember I said, excuse me, Mr. Moore, I said, would you do a jingle for me? And he went, a jingle? And I said, you know, like an ident. He went, what would you like? And I said, well, if you could say something like, you know, my name is Bond, James Bond, and he is King, Ross King. And he went, of course. You could see people looking, going, oh my goodness me, the kids asked this. And he did this whole lovely thing, which is, my name is King, Nosmo King. No relation to Ross King, but I'm Bond, James Bond. And he is King, Ross King. And I just remember looking at him and going, not only were you the most gracious, you've taken this time to look at this young guy and indulge him, but give me something which I played on the radio for years and years and years. And, you know, that was it. And I think meeting someone of his magnitude who, apart from being, I always thought Roger was a great actor, but being a nice man, being self-deprecating, and he was James Bond. And he loved being James Bond. So I took a lot from that interview. And when I look back on it, and even now, it gets me quite emotional when I think about that time. It was such a wonderful moment. And I think a real eye-opener as to how someone like that can be so gracious, even at the very, very top.
I love when the most gracious interviews or the people who are so lovely, and you just are so wowed by their kindness, you know. And then you see a few divas, and
of course,
you know. And but it's interesting, you know. I think, and you probably know them. I have a longtime friend, David Courtney, who used to be with Leo Sayer.
Yes,
so
of course.
You probably
yes,
interviewed Leo many times.
Yeah.
But you know, I think that each person has an essence, and I think a job of of a host or interviewer is to find that best key. Who was your most difficult story or interview? Because, there are those.
There are those. The interesting enough, we were just talking about this the other day. The one that everyone thought was going to be difficult was Barbra Streisand. Because, again, so A Star Is Born, I was at school when that came out. I went to see it. I loved Evergreen. I fell in love with her, Esther Hoffman Howard, and all the rest of it. And when I went to interview her, I was concerned because I'd heard stories, she can be a little difficult and all the rest of it. She was wonderful. She was gracious. She invited me back 2 weeks later to interview her again. When I went back to interview her again, they said the usual, no pictures, no autographs, nothing like that. Fine. We were doing the interview. It was overrunning. But she was chatting. Her publicist tried to step in, and she was like, "Hey, come on! I'm chatting with Ross. I'm chatting with Ross." And I'd never ever seen that ever happen. And then at the end of it, she said to me, because at one point I brought out a French 45 of her when she was 18, 19, and I sort of said, what would Barbara now say to that girl? And she was like, "Well, I wouldn't say anything because it worked out all right." And then at the end of it, she said, "Hey, Ross, should we do a photograph?" And I was like, yeah. And I'm looking around because, again, you think, it's Barbara and she's
Correct.
all the lighting. And I was like, looking for a photographer. And she went, "Have you got a phone?" "Oh, for goodness sake, get your phone out." And I was like, okay. And then she said, "Do you want me to sign that for you?" I was like, yeah. And so, that was that moment. But not evading the question of the most difficult. I think the most difficult one, but it did end up okay, was Russell Crowe and Christian Bale together. And I'd gone in, and I don't know whether they were having a bad day or they just decided, as Gary, with these junkets sometimes, people just get bored and they're fed up, and it's the same questions, and they're in an airless hotel room. And I went in, and I'd seen a couple of people come out looking not too happy and saying very, very, very not gracious things about what had been going on. And so I immediately sat down with them, and I said, "So you guys, were you up against each other for similar roles, or when did you first meet?" And for some reason, he said, I think it was Russell, went, "Yeah, mate, we were in the Boy Scouts together." And I was thinking, but Christian is originally from Wales. I was like, so where did you meet then? Was it like the World Jamboree or something? And then you could see them doing this. And then I said, well, of course, you both know the well-known Boy Scout song, Ging, Gang, Gully. Yeah. So they were kind of looking at me, and then they realized that I wasn't going to be phased. Yeah. And I was just going to keep going. And if you want to do silly voices and blah, blah, blah. And then eventually, at the end of the interview, I said, well, it's been an interesting one. I know you've had an interesting day. And Russell turned to Christian and said, "There's only one way to finish this." And I went, "With a song?" They went, "Yeah, Ging, Gang, Gilly, Gilly, Gilly." So everyone sang at the end. So that was a challenge, I would say.
Do you have a ritual that keeps you, your feet on the ground every day? Like some people meditate, some people do yoga. Is there a schedule for Ross King that he follows?
I do. I meditate.
Okay.
I try to meditate like first thing in the morning, and sometimes that lovely way when you're just coming out of your sleep. And sometimes if I set the alarm a little bit early, so I know that I can just lie there and just meditate. Yoga, I love doing yoga as well, because I think you get to a certain age, you need to stretch. It's a big thing. I give thanks to the universe every day. And I say out loud my gratitude to my mum and dad, and I'm not a hugely religious person, but I thank you to God and thank you to the universe. So I do that, and I say it out loud because I didn't realize before that with the gratitude, you need to say it. You need to say it out loud. So, yeah. And sometimes I'll just be sitting in the car, Gary. It's quite funny, and I'll just be going, "Thank you, Mum and Dad. Thank you, God. Thank you, universe." So I do that, and then also I think that just that thing of being mindful, and also when I came to LA, I went back to acting class for about 3 years. And one thing I learned there was to be present. And it was tricks that they gave me for going in for auditions. And I've never been a good auditioner at all, never been a good rehearser and all the rest of it. But what they taught me was to be present in the room. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I do now. So wherever, like even coming in to see you guys today, I'm very present so that it's a weird thing, and I've taught it to friends as well, just like simple tricks of how you do it and get yourself in the moment, because I think life passes us by so fast.
Absolutely. You know, and I just finished a new book called Sacred Happiness, and it's really about being in the moment.
Yeah.
That this is all the moment we have, because tomorrow we don't know. And I think so many people take life for granted, and they have unhappiness because they're always searching outside themselves instead of coming within and saying, you know what, I love Ross King this moment. My life is fantastic. What would you think the major situation, not only for celebrities or individuals who aren't happy? Why are they so unhappy these days?
It's a really good question. I think because they're not appreciative of everything that goes around. And this may sound really, really silly, but I will often, if I'm sitting in the chair watching the TV and I think, oh, I'll go and have a cup of tea, it goes through my head that I'm lucky that I can, A, get up and walk and go to the kitchen, and I've got water, and I've got electricity, and I've got a kettle, and I've got money to buy tea bags. And I know that maybe sound, I'm not trying to diminish anything, but I'm very mindful of things like that, and take it on board and think, again, how lucky I am. And, you know, we have instances, even in the past couple of weeks, and I'm sure you knew Sam Rubin at KTLA.
Yes.
And, you know, Sam was a great pal. We worked together for 6 years. And you think, on the Thursday, he's in doing what we're doing, being on screen, enjoying himself. Friday morning, not feeling great. By late Friday morning, he'd gone. Yeah. And you realize that thing of, we are only here for the briefest of moments. So enjoy it. Enjoy every minute. And even the bad stuff, you go, there's probably a reason why this is happening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, I think gratitude is the biggest thing, and we cannot take our, any moment for granted. But, you know, that's why your day is full. And I know you're also an author. Tell me about the books.
Oh, yeah.
'Cause that's brilliant.
Well, I write with a really lovely lady called Shari Lowe, and she's just sold gajillions of books. She's really, and at the moment, she's absolutely on fire with her writing. She came to me a few years ago and said, one of the publishers has come and said, would I ghostwrite your biography? And I said, well, it's a leaflet, it's a pamphlet. We can just hand that out to the family at Christmas. I said, I have no desire. I love biographies. House is full of them. I have no desire whatsoever to spill my, not that they're secrets, but, and I have also had a very lucky life. Came from a lovely working class background in Glasgow, and here I am in Hollywood. But I said, I have no desire at all. I said, I write with some people in terms of scripts and what have you. I said, but I've never written a book, but I do have some ideas. And she said, okay, well, I haven't written with anyone. We need to sit down and think of different stories. And I said, well, we could put some of the stories from my life in it, amp them up, bring them down, whatever. And the long and short was that I said, well, I've got this idea about these three young Scots, blah, and about an hour later, it was like, I think we've got the basis for the book. And then we just continued to write, and we've written 3 already, and there's 2 more to come. So it's amazing.
It's amazing. So tell me, I know a lot of people in America don't know what an MBE is.
Yes. That
is actually when Her Majesty the Queen gives you, it's not a knighthood, but it's almost like
it's the beginning. It's like a knighthood light.
So how does that work? Do they vote for you, or someone says from Buckingham Palace, Ross King?
Yeah, I don't. It's kind of secretive in some respects, because you don't know that either somebody's put you for, maybe one of the charities that I'd worked for, or somebody else has put your name forward, and then it goes forward, and then it's looked upon by this group of different people, and then they look, and I mean, I was so surprised, so thrilled to get it for broadcasting, the arts, because thankfully I've done quite a lot of theatre work as well, and for charity as well. And the interesting thing for me, Gary, was that when I was a kid, it was a big thing in Britain that New Year time and the Queen's birthday, it was the Queen's birthday's honours list, the New Year's honours list. And because my mum and dad did so much for charity over the years, whenever it would come out, I'd go, Dad, why are you not getting something? Uh-huh. And he said to me, he said, son, people like us don't get things like that. And that always stuck in my head. So it was never, ever a tiny thought that I would be gonged by the Queen. And so when it happened, I just thought, it's for my mom and dad. It's for them.
That's brilliant. When you do the, because you were just in London when I met you,
Yeah.
How often do they bring you over for Good Morning Britain or Lorraine?
Well, I travel over maybe 4 times a year,
Okay,
at least 4.
And then you go and do because I saw you on TV that morning.
That's right.
It was on Lorraine, and I see you in the airport after. But you know, what does that feel like when you go back there? Is it a bit? Because, you know, sometimes it's like going home.
It is very much like going home. And
then home is here also.
Absolutely. And I think that's the great thing. You know what it's like, Gary. You adapt because of our business and what you do, what I do. We just adapt. So, you can make any place home. But there will always be, for me, Scotland, Glasgow will always be home. And, I was lucky that when we met at the airport, I'd had the most bizarre incident where I've been in Glasgow to interview Take That huge pop group in Britain and Europe, play stadiums, and they were playing 3 nights in Glasgow at the Glasgow Hydro, which holds something like 20,000 people. Gary Barlow, who's the lead singer, so he's one of my best friends. So I'm sitting in a hotel across from the Hydro with my friends. There's about 10 of us, and we're waiting to go to the concert. And it's about 6:45. The show's meant to start at 7:30. There's a support act, Ollie Murs, who's a big star in Britain, had many number ones. Bottom line is,
he was on the Simon Cowell, right?
That's right. Yes, well done.
He
yes,
was
he was
the
indeed.
Show the other night.
That's right. So Ollie couldn't make it. Gary called me and said, "You have to go on." I was like, "What?" He went, "You've got to go on. We don't have a support act. You need to go on." So I then said, okay, it's now like 10 to 7, 5 to 7. I need to go on at 7:30. I said, look, there's also a young guy playing here in the restaurant. He's a nice player, nice singer. Why don't I bring him over? So Gary said, well, if you can go on first, because obviously you've got to tell the crowd Ollie Murs is not going to be appearing, and then you can do a little bit, bring him on, then come back on, do a couple of songs with him at the end. So I did it, but it was that great thing. It was my hometown. It was Glasgow. So people go, how on earth can you go from having a meal in a restaurant, then getting a call, and then being in front of 20,000 people in half an hour? But it's your hometown. So to walk out again in my hometown and then to say to my home crowd, guys, I'm going to bring out another young boy from Glasgow. I know you're disappointed Ollie's not making it, but here's this young guy. And it's changed his life. And it was, how lucky are we to be in a situation where you can turn around to someone and genuinely say, I'm going to ask you something or tell you something that will change your life. And it is, and he's got a new single out now, and a lovely guy, Daniel Rooney, and such a lovely young guy. So again, we're so lucky that whole thing of giving back and not expecting anything in return, I think, is the big thing.
And I think that's the thing is you're giving from the heart, and when you give back, the universe gives back to you.
Exactly.
And, so many people, I can't give away my contacts, or I can't give, there's enough for everyone.
I agree.
And I think these people that think that way, they're limited thinking,
Absolutely.
If you could go back in time to speak to someone and they're not here, no longer living, who would it be, and what would you ask them?
Great question. What a great question.
They can be performers, they can be scholars, they can be authors, they can be Julius Caesar.
Wow.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter at all. That's such a great question. I've never, ever had that question before. Never, ever actually really thought about it until now. I think it would be interesting. There was a Scots performer called Harry Lauder, who wrote amazing songs, Keep Right On to the End of the Road, sang, many famous songs, I Belong to Glasgow. And back in his day, he was earning something like, £25,000 then a week I mean, can you only begin to imagine what it must have been like? And this is back in like the 20s and 30s. And so to achieve the level that he did then, I think it would be fascinating to sit and have a chat with him. And again, just some of the, I also feel so lucky that I got to interview a lot of people that when I was a kid. I met Charlie Chaplin when I was 5.
Wow.
I mean, that's ridiculous. I'd like to have sat with Charlie Chaplin, actually, because he was this old man in a big black coat and the Homburg hat. And I'd like to have met the young Charlie when you see how much he did for artists as well. I think it would be those people as well that I'd like to talk to about their career, because what they went through as a child and coming through, and what they had to put up with, especially back in the day. So yeah, again, I think it's because I love biography. So I probably should have chosen someone much more sort of history making
so
worthy.
And when I first came to Hollywood, I was young, and I was thrown into the entertainment world, and I had the opportunity to meet Charles Bronson and Jill Ireland.
Oh.
And at that point, I didn't really know who they were. I was like 21, but they were so kind to me.
Yeah.
And they signed everything. We didn't have cell phones back then, but I remember sitting with them in the makeup room and chatting with them for a good 2 hours. And it was just, those moments you cannot forget.
Absolutely.
And then I had another dinner with James Coburn.
Oh, wow.
And it was very interesting because he knew he was ill, and I knew intuitively that he was going to pass. And he was asking me all these questions because I'm very intuitive, and some of my books in the beginning had information. So I sat there and I knew he was curious what the other side is about. But I'll never forget that dinner. And I think that's the magic of Hollywood, that those times, those people are gone.
Yeah, and there will be no one like them. Again, I
Correct.
think I think of Donald O'Connor came on a chat show I had at the BBC, and we tap danced together. I mean, I don't really tap dance, but I mean, he gave me a tap lesson. And then back in the day, I came out and interviewed Esther Williams, and
I hung out with Esther.
Yeah.
She gave me a quote from my second book.
There we are.
And what was so brilliant with Esther is she would sit with me and said, "Gary, do you remember when we went to Perino's?" And I go, "Yeah, tell me about it." I forgot. But I would spend hours with her listening to this. It was just brilliant.
Yeah.
And she obviously was losing, because I was an ex-swimmer for swimming. Competitive. So we had that in common. But she would sit hours telling me these stories, how she said, I was a sales girl at the whatever the store it was, Neiman Marcus or whatever the store was, and she said I didn't want to audition, and this agent used to come in and want me to go see Mr. DeMille. And I was like, no, or Mayor, Golden Mayor.
Yeah.
And so it was real interesting to just, we cherish those moments. I mean, I think for you, there's a book there.
Yeah,
on old Hollywood.
I think there is a book of the time spent with.
Yes.
And again, and also it's interesting when you're saying people being so gracious. I was so lucky to play Frankenfurter in the Rocky Horror Show, and then I did a play readout here for Eric Idle from Monty Python, and Tim Curry was there, who of course was Frankenfurter in the movies. And at the end of the play read, we're now kind of a little bit chummy, and I was like, Tim, do you mind if you sign? And he was like, darling, of course. And but I brought out like every, there was the poster, there was the album, there were, and the graciousness of him saying, like, don't dream it, be it, or to Ross, fellow Frank, but who did it better, and think, just I think it's when people just take that little bit of time, and I'm not going to mention who it is. There's a big superstar, and a friend of mine who's older guy, so he's not like a kid, went up to this major superstar and said, "Oh, would you mind if I have a photograph?" And they said yes. And he was about to relay a very important story, very brief. And the star said, "No stories, just a photograph. No stories, just a photograph." And I thought, I understand you're that big a superstar and you must get pestered all the time. But I thought the story he was going to relate to you was very important and actually would have been very beneficial to him as well. But it was like, no, that negating. And I always think, again, we just want to be positive.
Correct.
Get up, enjoy the day. The DM is there to be carped.
All right, last question.
Mm.
When you leave this experience in this lifetime, how do you want to be remembered?
Ooh,
Ross King, MBE
he was a good guy.
Okay.
He was a good guy. Yeah, that if I get left with that, he was one of the good ones, then I'll be happy.
Good. I am so thrilled for you to be here today. Thank you so much, Ross, for having this time with me.
Thank you.
And
I appreciate
wish you
it.
all the great success with all the things you're doing and the new things you'll be doing.
Well, let's hope so.
And thank you. And thank you all for joining me in this special episode of Ready, Set, Live. Until next time,